Hi, it's Mrs. Mallet, and today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. Now, you use the quadratic formula when you're trying to solve for x or solve a quadratic equation. Now, if you look at the top right corner, one thing you've got to remember when dealing with quadratics is that a quadratic equation must be set equal to 0. Okay, so standard form for a quadratic is when it's written equal to 0. Now, what I have in the left is the quadratic formula. That is the formula you use to solve a quadratic equation. So the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And I bet you're thinking, oh my god, what is a, b, and c? Okay, well let me break it down for you. Look at this example that I have written here. I have x squared plus 5x minus 6. Notice that that is set equal to 0. That is the standard way a quadratic should look right before you solve for it. Okay, so now let's do this. What is a, b, and c? A, b, and c correspond to your coefficients in front of each term. So in front of my x squared, I have my imaginary 1. That's going to be your a. The 5 here in front of your x, that'll be your b. And the negative 6 will be your c. So let's rewrite it here. So a equals 1, b equals 5, and c equals negative 6. Now we're going to put those numbers into the quadratic formula. So now let's go. First of all, x equals, so we have x equals negative b. My b is 5, so I'll have negative 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we have 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is negative 6, and all of this over 2 times 1. Okay, so now let's deal with this in a second. I'll deal with a plus or minus in a second, but let's simplify where we can. So I have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of, what's 5 squared? 5 squared is 25. So I have 25. So now we have negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. But what's negative 4 times negative 6? That's right, it's a positive 24. Okay, you see that? I multiplied negative 4 times 1 and got negative 4, and then took that negative 4 and multiplied it times the negative 6 and got a positive 24. So all of this over 2 times 1, which is 2. Now let's keep going using our order of operations. We want to still work under the radical. So 25 plus 24 is 49. So I have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 49 all over 2. Okay. So now what do we do next here? Okay, let me scroll back up for a second. Okay, so now what's the square root of 49? We haven't gotten into square roots yet, but what you want to think of is you want to think of, okay, what times what is 49? What same number multiplied by itself twice is 49? And that is 7. So now that square root of 49 breaks down to negative 5 plus or minus 7 all over 2. Now, here's where the plus or minus comes into play. This breaks down into two parts. You have negative 5 plus 7 over 2, and you have negative 5 minus 7 over 2. This is where the plus or minus breaks down. Notice here that when you do this, you're going to this will give you two answers. Okay, so you're going to end up having two answers. 9 times out of 10, when working with quadratic equations, you will always have 9 times out of 10. You will always have at least two answers for your quadratic. All right, so now let's solve these. So what's negative 5 plus 7? That's a positive 2, and positive 2 divided by 2 is 1. So there's one answer. Over here, negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12, and negative 12 divided by 2 is a negative 6. So your two answers for the quadratic is x equals negative 6 and 1. And that's how you can write your answers to solve your quadratic equation. Okay, so let me scroll back up here. And once again, when you're dealing with this is one way to solve a quadratic. Remember, I cannot stress this enough, your quadratic has got to be set equal to 0 before you can solve. If it's not, move a term over. You might have to add a term or move a term to the other side to get that one side equaling 0 for you to keep going. Alright, so this is Mrs. Mallet, and we worked with the quadratic formula.